People always ask me questions. I think because I'm the Imam, they believe that I have all the answers. They forget that I have many questions myself. I remember as a child constantly asking questions about faith. Who is God? Where does He reside? What choices do we have in the affairs of our lives? Why do we have to pray 5 times a day, etc.? I mean, these are the questions that plague the minds of all people, right? But it's not just the questions that have always amazed me, as much as the responses. You ask anyone today, and especially in the Muslim community, what is prayer and why do we have to do it? Their answers were no different from my mentors and teachers. Because God said so. Because it says so in the scripture. Because we'll commit sins otherwise, etc. For some reason, these answers were never enough for me. But one day I realized that I had not asked my dad this particular question yet. So I went up to him and asked, "Dad, why do we have to pray?" And with the most loving smile, he said, "Because prayer is life." Life? I wasn't expecting that. I wanted to inquire more, but my respect for him prevented me from seeking further explanations. I kind of just logged it away. But the lack of satisfactory answers never prevented me from practicing Islam. It made sense. Still, there was an element of spiritual void that was constantly annoying me. My dad's health was gradually dwindling, and one day, the loving, caring, extremely clever man that I owed everything to left this world. It was the darkest moment of my life. Drowning in melancholy, I reached out to a straw floating on water's surface. Prayer appeared to be one last thing I could cling to, and without hesitation, I prayed. And while I prayed, tears fell silently on my cheeks, washing away all my dark thoughts. Gradually, the tightness of my chest was fading. And boy, was that the most soothing experience I ever had in my entire life. For a few minutes, and for the first time ever, prayer wasn't about form or shape, direction or structure. It was like water putting out fire. It was like nourishment to a soil that was dying. It was life itself. And suddenly, I remembered my father's words. Prayer is life. So this is why we pray. Because it brings endless beauty to our hearts that could help us cope and manage. To be reminded of our most beloved friend and ally in this universe. On that day, which also happened to be the day my dad passed away, I was blessed with clarity of vision like I have never experienced before. And after that, everything changed. My quest as a Muslim was to search for that balance between beauty and function in everything God has brought to this world. So today, if you ask me, why do you pray? I say, because prayer is the crowbar I use to pry open locked doors. Because prayer is the brush I use to paint beauty around me. Because prayer is how I communicate with my Lord and my beloved. Prayer is life. And I realized, if I lived all those years missing out on the true blessings of prayer, how much more beauty am I missing out on? We're at a crossroads now. There's no doubt that the global Muslim community has lost much of its luster over the last few centuries. But as the poet said, much has been lost, but much abides. We're here to pick up pieces of our lost civilization and to contribute to our current societies. But we have to be sure that what we're contributing is symbolic of our heritage. Our God is beautiful and loves beauty. That's what we're offering here. Something of beauty to bring light back to hearts darkened by a harsh world. This is the legacy I plan to hand over to my children, and them, their children after them. see now how important this is for me? This show is the culmination of a lifetime journey, searching for answers, digging for value, and venturing for meaning. A quest for beauty in our great tradition that is finally coming to fruition. Over the past few decades, we have watched as the soul and spirit of Islam have been lost. Muslims are rule-bound. We've been reactionary. We have allowed others to hijack the image of Islam and write our narrative. That's why we need to take the matter into our own hands and present the side of Islam that we know. The side of Islam that conforms to the fundamental message of mercy and beauty that persist in the Quran and the statements of the Prophet. Our faith is not subject to public perception. As the Prophet said, Islam started as something strange and will end as something strange, so give glad tidings to the strangers. However, Islam values public perception. As the Prophet said, celebrate. Celebrate so that the adherents of other faiths don't say that Islam is a religion devoid of celebration. Public perception is important, but we have allowed that perception to cause us to reassess our faith in a negative manner. If you ask the average Muslim today, why do you pray? They respond that it was mandated by God, or that they don't want to go to hell. Though important, those aren't the only reasons why. Seldom will you hear a person say, I pray because I find beauty in it. Or, I pray because prayer brings calmness and tranquility. Both of which are the byproducts of experiencing beauty. However, the modern Muslim, so disconnected from his tradition, has adopted the law and abandoned the spirit of the law. We are rewriting our narrative. We always assume that our religion is beautiful, but we never explore and try to know what is so beautiful about it. It doesn't mean that we can ignore the rules. The rules are important, extremely important, but the key is to find the balance. Good evening, and assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to Heart of the Matter. I welcome and thank all of our brothers and sisters who have joined us today on this journey to explore the beauty in Islam. The topic of tonight's show is self-expression in Islam. When you hear the word self-expression, what comes to your mind? Is it poetry? Is it singing? Is it that you love to draw or make people laugh? Or create paintings to share your thoughts, feelings, ideas, and emotions with the world? Or perhaps to send a message? What about a tree? Or stars? Or a color? Is that expression? I look around me in all the things that God Almighty created, and I always see three elements that recur themselves in everything: purpose, function, and a message that God is trying to convey to us through them. On the other hand, I cannot help but also notice that the way God packages function, purpose, and the message is simply beautiful and stunning. It almost feels to me sometimes that God exerts effort when He doesn't. That God goes out of His way when He doesn't need to, in order to ensure that the message is not only functional, purposeful, and accessible to us, but also to package it in a beautiful way to appeal to our hearts, to draw us in. It is as if that God holds those objects so beautiful and so shiny, so that it attracts our attentions and we come to it and we draw ourselves nearer to it, and that's when we subscribe to it and the message that lies underneath. And that, brothers and sisters, humbles me. It makes me appreciate my Lord. It makes me love Him more. It makes me want to know Him more and know about Him more, to know His universe more and to know about myself even more. God
tells us in the Quran, سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. I will show them my signs on the horizons and in their own selves until it becomes manifest to them that this is the truth. And that led me to a remarkable discovery. I realized that nothing God created that is so beautiful without being so functional. And nothing out there is perfectly functional without being very, very beautiful. Take a tree, for example. Trees are trees. We can't live without them. My wife always says, I cannot imagine myself living in a world without trees. Trees provide us with oxygen. They are windbreakers. They strengthen the soil underneath. Tree is a natural habitat for all kinds of life forms and organisms and birds and squirrels and insects and bugs, things we know and things we don't know anything about. Its own complete independent ecosystem. But let me ask you this question. Is it necessary for the leaves of the trees to be so diverse in colors so the tree is able to achieve its function and provide us with oxygen? Was it necessary for God to create such a remarkable diversity of trees everywhere, different colors and sizes, if it was just about function? But it's not just about trees, right? One of my favorite verses in the Quran, God talks about mountains. ألم تر أن الله أنزل من السماء ماء فأخرجنا به ثمرات مختلفا ألوانها ومن الجبال جدد بيض وحمر مختلف ألوانها وغرابيب سود. Specifically talks about mountains and how some mountains are red, some mountains are white, some mountains are black. Why? If it's just about creating mountains for a particular purpose, why is it that God uses the hands of an artist to create such a beautiful, elegant, and diverse world? And I realized, brothers and sisters, that it is not just about small examples from our world. This is an underlying logic, a pattern, if you will, that exists in everything that God created. Look at the universe, celestial bodies and cosmic systems. When you look at the stars, what do you see? You see perfect functionality. They're perfect in orbit, in speed, in motion, in density, inertia, momentum. Everything about the universe is perfect. People go to school and get their PhDs studying the perfection of the universe. Laws of physics, right? However, the average person looks at the stars and just sees beauty. The universe is a stunning place. As a child, my dad used to take me on those nature walks. And you have to understand something. My dad was a chemist. He was a scientist. His mind works in terms of equations and elements and the periodic table. But I don't remember him ever talking to me during those nature walks about helium and nitrogen and oxygen and orbit and diameter and radius and the perfect functionality of the universe or the laws of physics. I remember him talking to me about constellations. And so when I was a kid, I looked at the universe. I didn't see elements. I didn't see perfect function. All I saw was bears, dragons, and dolphins. I enjoyed the beauty of the universe while I bonded with my dad. And those were some of the most cherished childhood memories I ever had. The thing is, though, if I'm saying that there is an underlying logic, this harmony between beauty and function that exists in everything God created, would you or would you not agree with me that it must manifested itself in the greatest creation God ever brought to this world? The answer is obviously yes. As men and women of faith, you will say yes, right? But then you will ask me a question that is just as important, and you will say, Well, what is the greatest creation God ever brought to this world? And this is entirely subjective, but in my humble opinion, the greatest creation God ever brought to this universe is not the stars, it is not the trees, it is not the oceans, it is not even us. I really think that we are second on that list. The greatest creation in this universe is the method and the instrument and the process by which God, in His transcendental existence, communicates with us in our mundane existence. And that process is called religion. And the answer is yes. I believe that religion, that the scriptures, that divine revelation is the greatest invention and the greatest gift and the greatest creation God ever brought to this world. And if we agreed that the harmony between beauty and function must manifest itself in everything, then it must have been manifested in that as well. And as a man of faith and as a Muslim, I believe that the Quran is my constitution. It's the source of guidance. It regulates my life. It gives me answers, and it provides me with values and principles. The Quran is a beautiful and comprehensive document that regulates your private life and your public life, that tells you how to treat your parents and your children, how to interact with your spouse, how to carry yourself in public, how to conduct your business. It talks about marriage and divorce and inheritance. Perfect functionality, remarkable structure. But let me ask you this question. If you truly think that it is only the function of the Quran and the purpose of the Quran that matters, why is it that God in the Quran talks about how He adorned the skies with the stars? That He talks about how the sun is a lantern? Why is it that the Quran is recited in such a beautiful melodic way? Why is it that the words of the Quran are written with this beautiful calligraphy? Why is it that the Quran rhymes so poetically? All expressions of beauty that are not necessary for the Quran to deliver its function. And I came to a great realization that there is something else about the Quran that makes it so amazing and so remarkable and makes it something that has such a profound impact on each and every one of us. And it's all because of that harmony between beauty and function. You see, you go out there and you ask the average Muslim about the sciences of the Quran, right? Most people will say, okay, I remember the science of tafsir, commentary on the Quran, by which we're able to interpret the verses and live by their teachings and instructions. Others would say, well, the science of tajweed, which has to do with the way the Quran is pronounced. Some will say asbab al-nuzul, the purposes of revelation, which describes basically the context under which a particular verse was revealed, right? Others will talk about grammar and so on and so forth. But these are all sciences that address the function of the Quran. What about the beauty of the Quran? If you ask the average Muslim about the science of maqamat, most people will tell you, I have never heard of it. In fact, look at our audience right here. I would say, what, about 80% of this audience is Muslim? 80% of the 80%, which I don't know how much is, like 64%, something like that. 64% of people in this room, just a little above half, never heard of maqamat and doesn't even know what that is. Now let me tell you, the science of maqamat is that science that addresses the method by which the Quran is delivered and recited in a way that conveys the feelings and the sentiments and the emotions that are embedded in every verse. It is the means, the medium by which the true spirit and essence of the Quran are conveyed with others. Why is it that maqamat is such a novel subject for most Muslims? I think it's because our minds are accustomed to treat our relationship with God according to those rigid guidelines that we've created. And once you remove that thought from your thinking and embrace the harmony between beauty and function in the Quran, you will automatically realize how indispensable maqamat is. It was a science that opened up a wide open door for academic careers, and for all kinds of emphases that focus 100% on the method by which the Quran is delivered. We call them al-Qurra, the reciters. And those are great scholars that have not excelled in Islamic studies, and they don't strive to become imams. The quest of their lives is to recite the Quran in a beautiful way and to help people absorb its teachings. It's interesting because people email me all the time and they tell me, Imam, I don't understand Arabic, but I was listening to the Quran the other day and the reciter impacted my heart so much that I cried. People cry, they react to the Quran without even understanding the words and the meanings of the Quran. How many of you would be very excited to observe a performance of maqamat right here? Exactly, that's what I thought. But I actually thought of doing it myself on stage, but I thought perhaps it would be better to record some pros, some really good reciters, exchanging maqamat and delivering the Quran in the most beautiful ways. And I hope you enjoy this video that we will show you in just 1 second as much as we enjoyed filming it. Don't go anywhere.
قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, Imam Azeez here. I'm sitting on top of this beautiful hill overseeing this remarkable scene and enjoying every bit of beauty it has to offer us. I have with me Sheikh Rifat right here, who is one of the most established reciters of the Quran in Northern California. And I wanted to demonstrate to you a really cool feature of the Quran. Of course, we know that the Quran bears a remarkable amount of rules and regulations and injunctions and teachings. But I'm focused today on a particular aspect of the beauty of the Quran, which is how it's recited in a nice and melodic way. Sheikh Rifat recited the Quran and he memorized it at a very young age, but he was never taught the science of maqamat. So I will show you that without him knowing anything about maqamat, he actually recites in those maqamat naturally. So what I'll do is that I will start reciting the Quran in a particular maqam, I will hand it over to the Shaykh, and you will see that he will pick it up naturally without any hesitation, and it's going to be a really, really cool thing. So please enjoy it with us. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها
والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد
لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا
أيحسب أن لم يره أحد ألم نجعل له عينين ولسانا وشفتين
وهديناه النجدين فلاقتحم العقبة وما أدراك ما العقبة فك رقبة أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة يتيما ذا مقربة
أو مسكينا ذا متربة ثم كان من الذين آمنوا وتواصوا بالصبر وتواصوا بالمرحمة
أولئك أصحاب الميمنة والذين كفروا بآياتنا هم أصحاب المشأمة عليهم نار مؤصدة
قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها
فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها.
Welcome back to Heart of the Matter. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I mean, I know I'm an average reciter, but mashallah, Sheikh Rifat is just out of this world. And I hope you enjoyed that recitation as much as we did. And the thing is, you really have to understand that every verse in the Quran delivers a different kind of emotion. So it only makes sense to use or utilize a particular maqam that emphasizes that emotion. So for instance, when it's talking about paradise and really happy thoughts, it makes sense to use a maqam that conveys a jolly spirit, right? On the other hand, when it talks about something a little scary, you know, God's anger or whatever it is on the Day of Judgment, it needs to be somber. When it's telling a story, then the emotion that is being articulated through the maqam needs to basically be something about anticipation, and so on and so forth. And this is how reciters do it. It takes sometimes decades for reciters to master the maqamat of the Quran and to be able to relay the feelings and the emotions behind every word in a way that really engages the listener and brings them right into the midst of that experience. Why is this an important subject? Because poetry, brothers and sisters, is another expression of beauty that is so fundamental to Islamic culture and Islamic tradition and Islamic civilization. Poetry. See, the Arabs used to have this remarkable saying, right? They used to say, God sent wisdom on the tongues of the Arabs, the minds of the Romans, and the hands of the Chinese. Let me repeat that. God sent wisdom on the tongues of the Arabs, the minds of the Romans, and the hands of the Chinese. When you think about it, it still holds true until the present day, right? Europeans are inventing stuff, the Chinese are making it, and Arabs are still talking, right? I'm right here. It's true. So when they say that's the Arabs' own testimony that the wisdom of God was sent to their tongues. I mean, they were given remarkable abilities when it comes to the faculties of the tongue. I mean, just so that you understand, they would go to this public sort of like gathering in the middle of the city, and then they would spar against each other, not with swords, with poetry, with the most amazing, the most inspiring, the most complicated of poetry, impromptu, on the spot. It all rhymes, it's all beautiful, it's all perfect, right? In fact, and let me say this and quote me on it, there are so many people amongst our youth, right? Many people, but particularly our youth, they are so fascinated with, freestyle rap and hip hop, right? They're very fascinated with this stuff. And let me tell you this. Here's a piece of truth for you. Freestyle delivery of hip hop or rap was invented by the Arabs before Islam. Because they would go, and without any preparation, they would start delivering the most beautiful of poetry to each other, right? So every time you think that you're so cool because you can freestyle rap, I can get all Umayy ibn Salt on you if I wanted to. Don't get me started. But why am I talking about poetry? Because poetry was so important. Think of it this way. God wanted to send His divine message to people that lived in Arabia. Naturally, in order to get their attention, the Quran had to challenge them in the one thing they mastered the most, and that is poetry. The Quran is not poetry, but it's so poetic, and it surpassed poetry in its power and its inspiration to the extent that Arabs who were poets, career poets for so many years, they just stood in awe of the power of the Quran. And it started with this linguistic beauty of the Quran that gradually attracted them, right? And eventually, most of them accepted Islam, right? And this is such an important subject because I see that there are so many people in the Muslim community in particular, right, who would say things like, what is the value of poetry? Why do we have to listen to songs and nasheeds and this and that? When you're driving your car, just listen to some Quran and be good for you. Be good for your soul, right? I compare that with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, once on this long journey in a caravan, and behind him was this young man, his name was Ash-Sharid. And he told him, Ya Sharid, do you have any of the poetry of Umayy ibn Salt, one of the great poets of pre-Islamic Arabia? Do you memorize any of his poetry? He didn't say, hey, Ash-Sharid, recite some Quran for me. He said, recite some poetry for me. And Ash-Sharid went on and on and on, verse after verse, and the Prophet's tears of joy are silently, basically falling on his cheeks. Right? There is beauty in poetry, and I invite you, whatever your language is, if you prefer poetry in English or poetry in Arabic or poetry in Urdu or Naat or Nasheed or whatever it is, explore it. And take that beauty in. It'll better your character and it'll make you a better person. All of these forms of beauty that I talked about, the arts of self-expression that I shared with you, all have to do with the utterances of the tongue, right? The recitation of the Quran and poetry. What about other forms of beauty in Islamic tradition that don't necessarily have anything to do with what you say? And I wanted to talk about one form of art in Islamic tradition, one form of self-expression that was so widespread, that was so intrinsic of Islamic tradition that it became symbolic of Islamic civilization itself across the centuries. You know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about calligraphy. Calligraphy. You never go to any mosque in the world, anywhere, in any country, big or small, without seeing the verses of the Quran scribed in such a beautiful way on the walls somewhere. The very first verse, in fact, the very first word that was revealed in the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad is Iqra, read. Now, when the Quran says read, that automatically emphasizes penmanship. Why? Because when I say read, naturally you will say, read what? And then I will have to show you something written for you to read. And this is how Arabs did it, right? They basically used the Quran and used the art of calligraphy to create those beautiful forms that made the Quran accessible to people, generation after generation. It was through the calligraphy of the Quran that knowledge was infused. It was through the calligraphy of the Quran, and this is very interesting, that the Arabic language itself was preserved. It is funny because standard Arabic that is spoken today is actually not very different from Quranic Arabic. Most Muslims understand Quranic Arabic. It is not a dead language, right? Now look at English, just compare and contrast to make the point. Look at English, for example. Compare California English with Shakespearean English. I mean, one would be really hard-pressed if Shakespeare used words like hecka or dude. Right? There's a huge disconnect between ancient English and modern English, right? Between American English and Australian English. Between California English and West Virginia. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? But Arabic, because the Quran and because the power of calligraphy, the words and the forms and the grammar, all of that was carried on generation after generation, and we still use those words and we still practice them in our lexicon. Mujahid, who was the greatest scholars of tafsir ever, I mean, At-Tabari and all the great scholars of tafsir, they owe all of their works to Mujahid, right? He commented on an ayah in the Quran, on a verse in the Quran once. يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. God imparts wisdom on whomsoever He wills, but whoever receives that wisdom has received an abundance of good. Now Mujahid takes the word wisdom. If I surveyed the Muslims in the audience here, what is wisdom here? They would say knowledge. But Mujahid says wisdom is the art of calligraphy. Can you believe this? This is a scholar of commentary. He says wisdom is the ability to write the Quran in a beautiful way. Why is this so important? Because if it was knowledge, I mean, God says, I impart wisdom to whomsoever I will. Would it be fair if I'm a student of knowledge and I would like to learn and God did not make that knowledge accessible to me? That's not going to be fair, right? But we don't have a problem when God gives different people different talents. So the talents that I was endowed with are different than the ones that God has given you, and we think it's fair because everyone has a unique talent, right, in their own right. And that's what Mujahid says, that the ability to write the Quran and any other talents and skills is just a God-given thing. And it's something to be cherished because you have been given an abundance of good. Okay? There's a chapter actually in the Quran that is called Noon. What is Noon? Noon is just the Arabic letter for N. That's it. And the very first verse of that chapter is just Noon again. The scholars used to say that Noon resembles an ink bottle. And the next verse that comes after it, وَالْقَلَمِ وَمَا يَسْطُرُونَ. You use the pen and you take the pen and use the ink bottle in order to scribe calligraphy. That's what the scholars of tafsir used to say. I can go on and on and on talking to you about calligraphy, but we thought that it would be a really cool idea to invite a calligraphy artist to talk about her work. So she came all the way from the Bay Area. She drove for 2 hours, and we conducted that interview with her. I hope that you guys enjoy it as much as we enjoyed filming it. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Imam Azeez here again, right in the middle of this beautiful mosque, the Salam Center in Sacramento, in the great state of California. I'm honored to have Sister Nabila Raza to have driven all the way from Fremont to join us on this segment. She represents the Islamic Art Exhibit, which is a beautiful exhibit of Islamic calligraphy out of the Bay Area. Sister Nabila, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for driving all the way. I know it was a long drive for you.
It was.
I wanted to ask you, my understanding is that you have an engineering degree. How did you end up doing this?
Well, the story is that I'm from Pakistan, and most women in Pakistan do not opt for going into engineering, especially mechanical engineering. So I did engineering, I completed it, I got married, moved to US in '92, and then I raised a family. You know, for the next 10 years, I was raising my family and not really involved in anything creative. I wanted to do something creative with my time that now I had. And I took a workshop with a Muslim Chinese calligrapher called Haji Nuruddin.
Haji Nuruddin, he's from China, but he comes to the Bay Area every once in a while.
Right, and he gives workshops. So after taking that workshop, it really inspired me and opened up my eyes to a whole new world. And from there on, I was really interested in doing this kind of artwork.
I see. So you went to mechanical engineering for the challenge, and then you got married, you moved out here, and you took that one workshop with Haji Nuruddin that completely changed your life, and that's when you decided to do something creative, and this was it.
Right.
Let me ask you a question. So do you ever feel that your engineering background helps you with this?
Oh, definitely. I think the engineering teaches me precision and balance and all the measurements that I need to do for my artwork. It comes from my engineering background.
Now, my question to you, Haji Nuruddin is a calligrapher, and calligraphy usually involves, paper and ink. Right. I think this looks more like painting. Where's the discrepancy there?
It is painting, and the reason I switched to this was that pen and ink requires a lot of practice to become a calligrapher. And with raising my 3 children, it did not give me enough time to practice that much. So I developed my own style. What I did was, if I designed a piece, I would draw it out on a piece of paper and put it on the canvas and paint it. So a traditional calligrapher would just write it with a pen on a paper, but I would draw it and paint it.
Is this like a lengthier process? Does it take more time or less time?
It takes a very long time. It's a lengthy process.
Yes. I noticed just looking at those 2 pieces right here, I mean, maybe not everyone would notice that, but the 2 represent the same chapter from the Quran. Right? I mean, I'm of Arab descent, so I could tell, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, this is that one small chapter in the Quran. However, they look completely different. So do you want to explain that?
Actually, they are both thulus type of calligraphy, but they are made in different ways. They are designed in different ways. One is in a circle, and one is line by line, just the regular way.
Right. So, and I guess that's where the engineering knowledge comes in. Let me ask you a question. So, you're a married woman, you're a mother. How do you bring that balance between the obligations and the responsibilities of your family and being an artist, which is an extremely demanding career?
The first thing is I take it easy. I have 3 kids, and they are in that difficult age of being teenagers that, I have to spend quite a bit of time with them too. But the thing is, I have my studio next to my kitchen, so I can be there anytime. I can be cooking and still going back and forth. And I take my time in doing these things. I involve them by asking them about colors I'm using or a design that I would like to do. And, if they're in a mood, they'll come and help me and, suggest something. But
so you're also engaging the kids and engaging the family in your work as well?
Yes, I'll try to ask something my husband that, do you think this color would look better or that color? And he will give his opinion. I may not take it, but there is his involvement.
One of the questions that also crossed my mind is, many Muslims, they emphasize rules and regulations very much in terms of their understanding of Islam. And we feel that this work brings balance between form and between function and beauty. How did that play out in your own life as an artist and as a practicing Muslim woman?
The thing is, this is beautiful. It looked beautiful to look at, but it has a divine meaning in there. So, and I like to decorate my home with the verses of the Quran. So the beauty is all around me and around my kids too.
And the meaning as well, because those are the words of the Quran, so you're still deriving that message from the words, but in a very, very beautiful way.
Exactly.
Honestly, Sister Nabila, I can't think of a more beautiful and a more inspiring example to bring that balance, that harmony between function and beauty than the amazing work that you're doing. I thank you so much for being with us, for showing us your beautiful artwork, and God bless you, and keep doing what you're doing. Again, balance between function and beauty. This is what this show is all about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome back to Heart of the Matter. We've talked to you, just giving you some examples on this episode about the expressions of beauty that reside in every corner of our great tradition. And this is an invitation to each and every one of us to try and go back to our own books and our own resources and our own mentors and undergo this paradigm shift about what it means to be a man or woman of faith in the modern world. Imagine the impact that this could have on all of us as Muslims and as a community of faith trying to negotiate its world in the tough realities of the modern world. It is funny because I said earlier that the greatest gift and the greatest creation that God gave us was religion. And I see that it's so ironic that many people in this world have taken that beautiful gift and turned it into an instrument of destruction, into an instrument of division, sowing the seeds of hatred amongst people. And this precisely is what happens when people practice the function and live the structure disconnected from beauty. Because that yields nothing but ugliness. It yields nothing but ugliness. It is only through the balance between those two things that you can have a beautiful product, a harmonizing and unharmonized product that came directly from God for you to make our lives better. So next time you're stuck and you're trying to make a decision, ask yourself, does this conform with the teachings of religion? If the answer is yes, you move on to question number 2. Does this impart beauty on the hearts of people around me? And if the answer is no, then you need to rethink your methods. The rules are extremely important, and I'm not saying that you should drop them or live on a cloud and enjoy beauty without following the teachings of God. That's going to be a no life. What I'm saying is that make beauty the method by which you're able to take the teachings of God and spread them in the world and make the world better. So we ask ourselves, as men and women of faith, now that that harmony hopefully is clear in our minds, how does it play out in our own private lives? In your relationship with your children? In the way you carry yourself in public? How does it impact your family relations? How does it impact your business? How does it impact your state of mind? How does it impact the health of your body? How is it that that harmony could be utilized to make you a wholesome human being? How does the harmony that I talked about tonight is reflected and manifested in your relationship with God? Next time when you fast, are you always concerned just about the rules and giving no heed whatsoever to the beauty of your experience? Next time when you pray, are you just focused on where to put your hands and how to follow every single letter of the word? Or are you trying to derive beauty out of your experience and elevate your spirit and live something beautiful 5 times every day? You know, we decided to just go out there and interview as many people as we could in our limited time and ask them a very simple question. Why do you pray? And we sent our correspondent and dear friend Kamran Islam out there touring the world, asking people this very simple question. And I think we have him on satellite. Kamran, can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, I've got you loud and clear.
So tell us where you are. It looks a little cold out there.
Yeah, it's getting a little chilly. It was nice and warm earlier, and we had a few more people out.
So tell us more about what you guys are working on that has taken you halfway across the world.
Well, while you all have been sitting in your studio, cozy and warm, we've been out here in the elements doing some hardcore investigative journalism about today's topic. Specifically, we've been asking people, why do you pray? Take a look.
Yeah, basically, namaz is one of the basic faraids, you know.
It's a commandment of God to pray 5 times a day.
Because God has ordered us to pray 5 times a day.
I pray because it is an obligation in Islam.
I pray because it's one of the first pillars of Islam.
I pray because it's something that Allah said, and it's like it makes you have good feelings in your heart.
I pray because I want to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what He's done for me.
If your boss calls you, you're going to give him the time, right?
I pray because that is my way of communicating with my Creator, Allah, and that's the best way. I believe it makes me feel good.
To build a connection with God.
Yeah, I think it's to kind of go back every day, and that 5 times a day, it's kind of a connection with God, and it really reminds you why you're actually like the purpose of life.
I pray because it keeps me grounded, it keeps me connected with Allah, it reminds me of my greater purpose, and makes me happy. Yeah.
Now clearly, that last response was very different from the first answers. And as we did a little more prodding, we found that Muslims across the globe don't just pray because God said so.
الله سبحانه وتعالى يهدي من يشاء ويضل من يشاء والحمد لله الله رزقنا الهداية الحمد لله.
मैं इसलिए नमाज़ पढ़ती हूँ कि मैं अल्लाह ताला को खुश करना चाहती हूँ। अल्लाह ताला ने मुझे इतनी नेमतें अता की हैं कि उसके बदले में मैं अल्लाह के लिए 5 वक्त की नमाज़ पढ़ के उनका शुक्रिया अदा करूँ। इसलिए मैं 5 वक्त की नमाज़ पढ़ती हूँ।
waxaan u tukadaa Allah cabsigii dartiis Allahan ka cabsanayaa nin muslim baan ahay oo Allihiisa ku tiirsan oo diintiisa lagu soo koriyay marka salaada waa farad waa waajib bay nagu tahay saali ajligeed ayaan u tukanayaa.
So you can see from that second segment that people are praying for their families, for tranquility, to connect with God. Imam, our investigation has revealed that prayer is about more than just fulfilling an obligation.
Wow, Kamran, that was really interesting. You've been out on the field for a while. When do you plan to come back?
Well, I was thinking of coming home now.
Kamran, are you still on satellite? Hello, I think we have a connection problem, you guys. How?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
This is Kamran Islam, everyone, our correspondent.
Thank you. Thank you.
So how did you come here so fast?
Well, you know, we had a lot of questions on the interview. Why don't you just ask me about that?
Oh, wait a second. Why were you delayed in your response?
What do you mean?
Kamran, we're on stage. There's no satellite connection anymore.
Hold on, this just in. There is no satellite delay. I'm on set. Yes. Okay. Yeah, of course.
Never mind.
Whoops.
Never mind. Just talk to us about the interview. I saw you out there interviewing people. 90% of the responses reinforced what we were saying, that people just pray because it's mandatory.
Imam, it was incredible. Our community is so brilliant. It's incredible. You know, I feel like we've left the time of Ghazali, the time of Ibn Rushd behind. Today's community is so inspiring. I was amazed.
Well, you're kidding, right? Because all the responses were kind of wrong.
No. The responses were correct. You see, if this was a test question, why do you pray? The vast majority of Muslims in our global society would get 100%. You guys know what that means, right? That means A+. And A, kids at home, is for Allah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, and even A'udhu Billah.
Hold on. This is wrong. Who hired this guy? I did?
Thank you.
Come run Islam, everybody. As you can see, expression is a fundamental aspect of our humanity. And it is a blessing that God has given us the ability to communicate deep and abstract emotions with others of love, of sadness, of compassion through the various mediums we've discussed. In totality, these forms of expression are what create culture, and without them, culture ceases to exist. They act as a means of catharsis for communities struck down by never-ending injustice. Like the old slave songs in this nation that provided hope in hours of darkness. They act as a means of promoting values important to a society, like the Arab poems on chivalry and generosity. These expressions are perhaps one of the few things that make us human. They offer us an opportunity to communicate who we are and what we are feeling. Our self-expression is a cornerstone of our experience and our ability to be empathetic. And it is that empathy that makes it possible for us to connect with each other and to bond, to make friends, and to kindle lost relationships when tragedy strikes. We hope that you've enjoyed delving with us into the heart of the matter this week. And until next time, may the peace of God be upon each and every one of you. Wassalamu alaikum.